Hey there, Gamerinos and Gamerinas. Welcome to UnicornStorm. This is Rady, and this is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I actually wanted to cold start the video with a scene really early on in the game that really pissed me off and make a bit out of it, but as you can see, I decided against it. I'm gonna approach this in a different manner because I have a lot of issues with this game already. I already had a lot of issues with the unfortunately named Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I did like the game, and so far I like this game. So I'm gonna throw my recommendation out first, and then I'm gonna get down to the nitty gritty. So for everyone who just tuned in to know if this game is worth playing, well, I mean, yeah, sure. The game is fun, it looks good, it's well voiced and acted, the combat is action-packed and more fluid than in the previous game, the world is vast and there's a million things to do, crafting, trading cards, a bunch of different upgrade systems. It is, so far, a good game. Not much of an improvement over the previous one in many cases, but yeah, a fucking grand old time. If you enjoyed the unfortunately named game Final Fantasy VII Remake, then you will for sure like Rebirth. And if you haven't played the previous one, well, you should before jumping into this one. The 5-minute recap really doesn't tell you that much, I guess. Or maybe they dropped most of the plot threads and it's really only those few mentioned things that count, but I doubt that. So I wouldn't recommend it as a standalone. But as the next chapter in this weird alternate interpretation of Final Fantasy VII, this is a game I would recommend. So now let's get to the meat of it. Here, this is the scene that immediately dampened my enthusiasm about this game. And it's not even that I didn't expect something like that. I feared this game would make the same missteps as its predecessor, but it still annoyed me when it happened. And once again at the start of the game. So we take off? Oh right, I assume that you're familiar with the previous game. You should be. And while I won't get out of my way to spoil stuff from the original game, if the comparison is needed, or if events in this game reference something happening at a later point in the original, I will mention it. But yeah, we take off right after the ending of the previous game, where we caught a glimpse of the altered events of the story, where Cloud and Zack both survived and returned to Midgar. There, we see the destruction caused by our final battle, though it seems this here is an alternate reality, maybe created by us fighting fate itself in the previous game. All our heroes are badly hurt, maybe even dead, but Cloud is not among them. I mean, of course, he's here, with Zack. So maybe they lost because they didn't have Cloud with them? But how would they all have met up then? It doesn't really make sense, at least not without further explanation. But let's just accept this for the time being. Zack tries to save Aerith and flees with her, but sadly, he's too late. Aerith is already dead. And yeah, here we are. 5 minutes in, and the game, and by that I mean the writers or maybe the director or other executives, grew impatient and had to shoot their load early. Again. So, while this is a spoiler, technically, this point has been discussed to death leading up to the release of the unfortunately named Final Fantasy VII Remake, and again before the release of this game, and we caught a glimpse of it in a vision before the final boss fight in the previous game, so it isn't much of a secret that in one version of the story, Aerith died. A tragic and important event for the whole story. And there was some fear or speculation that maybe in this new interpretation of the story, she might survive. Well, here we got our answer. She's dead 5 minutes in. So I guess now she can survive the main story or reality or however the game wants to handle it, and Square Enix can still proudly claim that they didn't shy away from killing Aerith. And of course they copied that iconic moment to a beat, with her hairband untying and the white materia dropping to the floor, bouncing just a few more times. Because we can't build up to such a moment. No, we have to have it now. This was such a great moment that we can just shove it in. There doesn't need to be a series of events, a finely crafted story to support this, to make this payoff work. And you know what? For a lot of people this is true, because they already love the original game and subconsciously make the connection and don't consider that in this new story this is just a standalone moment with no emotional depth. It's the cheapest form of fan service that doesn't respect the original work. It's the same with revealing Sephiroth at the start of the previous game, playing his final battle theme during the intro. These moments haven't been earned, they just latched themselves onto an already beloved story. And yet, even with this fan-servicey mess, with the depiction of Aerith's death, with Zack surviving and returning, the game still blueballs us. Because this is just an alternate reality we only get to see for a few minutes before returning to the main story. Why even do this at all? Oh, of course. But yeah, after that, I knew what I was getting into. This giddiness to reveal plot elements early continues non-stop, with Sephiroth proclaiming his mother's name and doing the foreshadow laugh immediately afterwards. Or with Tifa just outright stating that Cloud wasn't back with Sephiroth in Nibelheim as he claims, making this playable section a hallucination or delusion or something. It's just one line of dialogue short of just explaining the whole twist and his arc an hour into the game. And it doesn't help that in the opening sequence of this chapter, the camera behaves conspicuously inconspicuous in hiding this one soldier's face from us. And you can't just write this off to incompetency, because later in that chapter, they handle this whole plot point rather cleverly, when the security officer weakly calls out for his mother, or Cloud having a brief vision of him wearing different gloves. And if this doesn't make sense to you, it's alright. It's supposed to be convoluted at first and be pretty obvious in hindsight. But again, I urge you to play the original before jumping into these reimagining, continuation, alternative story developments. So yeah, after the brief alternate reality thingy, the game opens to a part of the story that's very dear to me. The Nibelheim flashback, in where Cloud tells the others how Sephiroth became the monster he is today and how him, Cloud and Tifa are connected. And it was handled pretty well. It's a bit cheeky with the humor in its narrative device of Cloud telling the others the story, which is at times rather clever and at others not so much. So it's pretty funny when in the middle of Sephiroth's sentence the scene freezes because Barret interrupted Cloud, which he does again later in the chapter, and sometimes the others react to and comment on the things you do during that chapter. But then there's the piano scene. So Cloud describes how he entered Tifa's house, how he entered her room, maybe even rummaged through her underwear, which is again rather well done. But when he gets to the piano, a little minigame starts that's similar to the guitar minigame in The Last of Us 2. Still no problem here, but after you stop playing the minigame, suddenly the whole party is fascinated by Cloud's talent, like they were actually there, like they listened to him playing. The game forgot that this is a story within a story. This is something one character tells the others. It's not a huge problem, not even a big one. In isolation it's minuscule. You might call it a nitpick, but it speaks to the storytelling abilities of the people involved. Or maybe their ability to tell a consistent story. Like the previous game, it's for the most part pretty good, but dragged down by some stupid mistakes that are preventable with just a bit of thoughtfulness. And this game, again, like its older brother, is full of stupid mistakes, or maybe missteps. Like how at the end of this chapter, when Sephiroth goes on a murderous rampage, Cloud gets injured and has to slowly limp through the village, while NPCs the game wants you to observe are awkwardly waiting for him around the corner. And this drags on. Or when the game shows multiple militiamen with rifles cornering Sephiroth, and not one of them takes a shot as he clumsily slices them up one after the other. Without any blood, of course, even though he slashes through their arms and legs. So either show the results of the brutality, or don't be that brutal at all. As it is right now, it just looks awkward. And speaking of awkward, look at this NPC bursting out the door. Oh, hi there! There's more where that came from. The designers created some really strong moments, emotional scenes and all that, but there's always an NPC stiffly walking through the scene, shoving you or your party members out of the way. Not that your party members are much better. They are following Cloud around, always staying near him. When a player stops moving, they'll also come to a stop, but they don't just run along behind Cloud in single file. They do have their own pathfinding and dynamic traversal behavior, which results in them bumping into all kinds of physics objects. All the time you hear glass or ceramic shattering or wood breaking and see tools and crates flying around. These guys are a menace. No wonder the authorities are after them. That said, the game is rather picky when it comes to which objects are affected by physics and which are not. Which wouldn't be much of a problem if the game didn't have this system in where you need to swing your giant sword around and break all kinds of containers to get medicine and resources and stuff. It comes off a bit goofy when you can destroy everything in a room besides the expensive vases. Honestly, they should have just dropped the sword slashing system and hidden the goodies the tried and true way of placing them in bookshelves and toilet bowls. And by that avoided this weird issue. But yeah, look at those environments. They are again incredibly detailed and beautiful. The developers went all out in reimagining these tiny one-screen locations. Look at what they developed the town of Calm into. Look at the world map turned open world. This is such a beautiful game. Some really strong art design, lush environments overflowing with details. And they really thought about how to bring these old designs to this modern art and graphical style. Like with the effect Mako has on plants and wildlife, or just all these industrial elements like pipelines surrounded by nature. The character models are also, again, really great, and they are really well voiced and acted, at least in the original Japanese voiceover. The cutscenes are superbly edited and directed, but with all the effort that went into it, with all the great work all those involved have put into, sometimes there's just some tonal clash. Aerith turned into a 5-year-old with more similarity to Selphie from FF8 than her original counterpart. Barrett switches back and forth between angry and assertive leader and comedic doofus. Cloud, in good old anime fashion, is not able to say the reasonable thing to a girl, and instead keeping secrets about his whereabouts after he got betrayed by Shinra, because I guess he really respects the NDAs he signed. Which is a shame, because for the most part, the characterization of all these characters is pretty spot on. That was one of my fears leading up to the release of the unfortunately named Final Fantasy VII Remake, that they'd continue with the characters' weird emo personalities from Advent Children or Kingdom Hearts, but no, they stayed true to the original incarnations, mostly. Also returning is the hybrid battle system, combining real-time spectacle fighting with ATB action commands. And it got improved. You can now even choose classic style without immediately being restricted to easy difficulty, it seems. Which is certainly an improvement from the previous game, though I haven't tested it so I don't know how well it works. The action combat feels more fluid, more freeform, and the ATB system doesn't seem to hold the action portion back so much anymore. Though I guess this got already improved with the intermission DLC. But yeah, I like the combat a lot more this time around. ATB seems to charge quicker, blocking can now negate any damage if timed correctly, and you have now way more options during combat. Once again, each character plays differently. Even the sword users, Sephiroth, Cloud and Zack, have their unique playstyles. Everyone has their basic attacks and combos that can be differently chained together or hold to unlock different attacks. There are follow-ups after blocks or dodges, and then they have their character abilities. Cloud has his Punisher mode he can switch to deal more damage at the cost of mobility. Barret can go into overcharge and fire powerful projectiles. Aerith can warp around the battlefield. And now we can even control Red 13, who lunges across the battlefield and can quickly hit multiple foes with his sharp claws. And in this game we can finally arrange the party composition ourselves, so we can mix and match who we want to take with us on our journey at any time. With some exception at certain points in the story, of course. But this is a major improvement over the previous game. Though this comes with its own problem. Because the unused party members still follow you around. Not as closely as your active party, but still very closely. And since they're around you at all times, it comes off a bit weird that they're not helping during combat. They just vanish as soon as the fighting starts. Why not use the same explanation as in the original, where the party actually split up to not raise too much suspicion, and then have them meet up when using a radio or phone or something. I don't need Barret and Tifa watching me from afar. It's more creepy than anything else. There's another small issue that might grow over the course of the game. This issue was already in Final Fantasy XVI, where you could hear some screeching or squeaky sound all the time while running around. I thought this was a problem with the disc or maybe my TV, but it seems to stem from the animation from one of your party members. You see, whenever they are not on screen, they get teleported near you all the time, to keep up the illusion that they're smoothly following behind you. Well, after these teleports it seems her animation resets, which is accompanied by a few sound effects, and since this happens constantly, this results in this high-pitched squeaking. And well, FF7 Rebirth seems to have the same problem. While running around in the open world, I constantly noticed these high-pitched sounds. I guess the reason for this is the same. Maybe they'll patch it this time around. Fights this time around don't start immediately. You have a few seconds to get away before the enemy becomes aware of you, and during that time you can also initiate combat by attacking first. And by that I mean declaring war on the enemy, because you're not actually performing an attack, but it does charge your ATB a bit, for some reason. Now, normally during traversal you can press the action button or keep running to automatically jump over obstacles or down to a lower platform and such things. But this is disabled during combat, for good reason. And there's also no jump button. So now, like in this situation here, I can't reach the enemies. Cloud awkwardly stops his lunges and dashes as to not jump down this little rock. This could be fixed easily with allowing you to ignore patches of the terrain you could normally vault over when doing dash attacks and the like. New additions to the combat are unlockable weapon skills and synergy abilities. Weapon skills bolster the list of your weapon finishers you permanently unlock by mastering a weapon, same as in the previous game. The skills are bought with skill points you receive from leveling up or finding skill books. You then select a skill core from a board similar to FF10's Sphere board, pay the required amount of SP to add this skill to your move list, or gain other benefits. These moves can be spell alternatives to your materia, or they can be additional attacks or defensive maneuvers, but some of these skills are things like 5% attack increase, 200 points health bonus and stuff like that you need to equip to your weapon. It has some similarities to the system from the previous game, but it's mostly a whole new deal. The synergy abilities are a different beast. With a synergy move, you need to have the ability unlocked and the correct characters in your active party. Now, that's not all. The synergy moves require the participating characters to have attuned to each other during the battle, and this is gamified by them needing to have spent their ATB bars on special attacks. So you need to perform a certain number of special attacks or spells during a battle to ready a synergy move. That might inflict damage onto the enemy or give you an impenetrable defense for a brief moment, or do whatever else the little text blurb says. And it also comes with other benefits, like temporary stat increases or health or mana regeneration, maybe a speed boost. During regular battles you won't see too many synergy abilities, but during boss battles they do come in handy since they are free to use if their requirements are met, and they charge up your ATB and come with other benefits. And to unlock more synergies you need to raise the party level, which is different from the character level or the weapon level. It gets a bit complicated and navigating the menu isn't always the most intuitive. When you select weapon upgrades, you don't see the requirement for weapon mastery. You have to go into the equipment menu behind the character loadout menu. This should have been more streamlined, with maybe more shortcuts. There's also crafting in the game, because you can't be an open world game without crafting and mindless resource gathering, and your crafting ability also comes with its own level. There's a bit of feature creep going on in this game that overcomplicates the things that could and should have been simple. All these different resources, points, levels, and of course the fancy names for all those concepts and systems makes navigating the menus more cumbersome, understanding the mechanics harder. Why do I need weapon levels to unlock abilities I need to purchase with skill points received from leveling up my characters? Why not just have the character levels with a perk system? And why give it a weird name like Folio and have Cloud pretend it's something completely normal and common, even though it's a new addition in this game and something he didn't have access to in the previous game, which means yesterday in his time. But okay, he also lost all his stuff and forgot all about his battle experience since then as well, so maybe he's just rolling with the punches. Now don't get me wrong, the added customization with a greater impact on the moment-to-moment gameplay during battles is very welcomed. But I think all those different, fractured, isolated systems could have been a bit more streamlined. As I said, just have the characters unlock their skills from the character screen and don't tie it to the weapon. And while it is a neat idea on paper to have the party level govern your selection of available skills, this one is raised by discoveries, random side quests and stuff like that, so it feels a bit weird that Cloud can only learn to hit a bit harder if he had been sightseeing with his friends for long enough. The party level makes total sense for the synergy attacks, but those are selected from the same upgrade menu, so here these systems begin to interfere with each other. Especially since there is also a relationship system in this game, where you can at times talk to party members and, depending on your dialogue choices, affect the bond between them and Cloud. Certain side quests affect this as well, as does the usage of synergy attacks, and the game claims this will in turn affect certain parts of the story. I mean, we already had some invisible sympathy mechanics both in the previous game as well as in the original. Let's just hope this more transparent system affects more than just the color of a dress or the participants of a Ferris wheel ride. That said, it's a bit odd how all the trust those people built with each other over the last game is suddenly gone again, and now all the people I grew close to have this neutral little emoticon over their heads. It just feels wrong after a whole ass game, and it wouldn't feel that wrong if my time with those guys so far had only been 3 hours, like in the original. But yeah, that's a different issue. Point is, this system could have been used to automatically unlock the synergies without weapon skill points, and then they could have dropped a whole unnecessary upgrade menu. It just got needlessly complicated, but this isn't a new thing for JRPGs, which love to add and add useless stuff to the detriment of the core gameplay. Now, all these systems work, pretty well in fact, but just a bit more fine-tuning is needed. This here looks like the creative heads threw all their ideas just into the game and no one dared to speak out against it. There's also now Gwent in Final Fantasy. Yeah, alright, there already was Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII, and that was fucking fun. And there was Tetramaster in FF9, which was a bit lacking. This new card game seems fine. I haven't spent too much time on it yet, but it's alright so far and not as lore-breaking as the 4 Condor miniature game from the Intermission DLC. For the most part, this game is just more of what came with the previous game, with a few improvements. I mean, it is a continuation. We have the same characters that broadly play the same, and it is the same world, so we can expect similar mechanics. There are still vending machines everywhere to quickly stock up on potions and stuff, benches to take a break and heal up, and chocobo stops for quick travel. The biggest change from the previous game though is that this is now an open world game. While the areas in the unfortunately named Final Fantasy VII Remake were quite big, it was still mostly corridors. But in this game you can freely move everywhere you want. I mean, there are exceptions, but this is to be expected. But if an incline isn't too steep, you can climb it. If a gap isn't too wide, you can cross it. This means the game has less control over your traversal and how you arrive at and tackle any challenge. Or well, at least some of them. And this in turn means the systems that worked perfectly fine in a highly scripted environment don't work as well in a more open, freeform game. So they changed them. The chocobo stops are still here, but you can't just freely use them to zap over the whole world in an instant. I mean, you can, but you need to achieve some things before that. Before you can interact with a chocobo stop in any region, you first have to find and catch the unique chocobo in that region. And inside those stops are rather uncomfortable benches that you can only use if you have a cushion with you. So now there isn't free healing at every corner. The free health replenishment benches are mostly designated to settlements and the like, so you have to make a choice. Is it worth the time investment and maybe risk of running into a strong enemy to get back to a settlement to heal up, or would you rather spend some resources at a stop? It's not a huge addition, but a neat little feature to make your decisions during exploration a bit more meaningful. The new game world is a beautiful, detailed open world, large and vast with so many interesting spots and landmarks. But there's nothing to it all, at first. When you first arrive outside of Calm, there is not much to do in this meticulously designed open world, aside from mindlessly gathering resources and opening the odd minor treasure chest. The ruins are abandoned, houses are locked, radio towers are inactive. When you actually come across a small settlement, the NPCs only have their little idle dialogues. After progressing in the main story for a bit, many of these locations open up or get filled with combat challenges or exploration rewards, but why even let me explore these areas if there's nothing to accomplish in there yet? The 2 recent Zelda games handled this a lot better. With an isolated area you can fully explore and achieve a lot in and come to grips with the game's mechanics before being let loose on the rest of the open world. Here, it just feels artificial. I mean, not everything has to be accessible from the start, and not every quest giver or monster or whatnot has to be in position at this point in the game. And it's also fine, even desirable, to have some locations only be there to add to the world and not to have a quest tied to it. So to not have it appear as though it only exists as a chore for the player to complete. Which it of course always is, but we don't always need to know, right? But having nothing? I can run around this first area for hours. It is rather huge for what it is, and there are a lot of interesting landmarks to discover, but I can't accomplish anything here right now. Yeah, I guess the game wants to urge me to follow the main quest for now. But then why even let me explore so far out? Why not stop me and remind me that there are more urgent things to do right now and let me explore when there's actually something to achieve in this stunning game world? The game does it at other spots, and I mean, after the game opens up, it really opens up. There are unique enemies with their own challenges and restrictions to find, pieces of lore to discover, even more systems to unlock that also have their own progression, like Moogle shops or world intel. Most of what you do is chores, of course, but it's presented rather nicely. You'll encounter eccentric characters, some new and some already known from the previous game, and there's always a bit of story accompanying these side quests and moments for your party members to shine. There are Ubisoft-inspired radio towers that highlight more points of interest on your map. The battle simulator is back, and with that the challenges to unlock summoning materia. But this time around, there's a twist to it. So, I got destroyed during my attack on Titan. But hidden in the open world are crystal structures that you can activate to, I guess, unveil secrets about the summons that you can use to weaken the summon in the simulation, but also strengthen its materia. So you make it easier to acquire a more powerful materia. Pretty neat. The music this time around feels a bit more faithful to the original, though that might just be me. But I feel that you hear a lot more tracks that are more similar to the originals than the more experimental renditions. Though there still are those experimental renditions in the game. Overall, the soundtrack is really good, but that already was the case with the previous game and of course the original. But not just the tracks are good, the way it's implemented into the game is as well. The music dynamically fades out or into other tracks depending on where you are on the map, with some transitioning notes or sections to make it more smooth. Sorry, I'm not a music theorist, so I can't explain it in greater detail. There's also different versions of each track, like a few for exploration depending on where you are, and one for combat, so the music doesn't completely change when a battle begins, but just ramps up into a more energetic version of your background track. It sounds pretty awesome and wraps around the gameplay rather naturally. It enhances the exploration, and I mean, that's what a good soundtrack is supposed to do, right? So all in all, I have a great time with this game. With this very, very disappointing game. Disappointing to me, of course. And to a lot of other people who were pretty vocal about their issues with the previous one as well. There is something really misguided with this whole reimagining project. A lot of it comes down to the Nomura style of storytelling and the overinflation of certain parts of the original to justify a multi-release epic. This shit broke the Hobbit's neck, but I guess Square Enix had to experience that for themselves. And of course, there's the feature creep. But there are still a lot of great things in this game. The beautiful game world, the expressive characters, the exhilarating combat. With all my harsh critique against this game, as well as its predecessor, I still think these are good games and well worth playing. And at least with the release of this game and all its weirdness and the reveal of the naming convention for the trilogy, it's clear now that these games don't exist in the same space as the original. This is a different story and not a replacement. You even should play the original to grasp what this trilogy is trying to convey. which even makes the previous game retroactively less disrespectful in my eyes. So yeah, a good game. Very flawed, but well worth playing. So have an awesome day. That's it from Rady, and I hope to see you again on the next game. Ha! And to all those who praised the fucking game for being released on 2 discs, who congratulated Square Enix after that announcement like this means anything at this stage in the gaming industry, who pretended like this meant the game had to be bigger and more packed with content than any other game that ever existed, when people pointed out that this was most likely just a fancy way to say that the game comes with an install disc. And what happened? One of the discs is an install disc. This was the greatest moment when I opened the game box. I haven't even put the disc into the system and already it brought me this much joy.